We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am super excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Jen Straus. She's the Vice President of People Operations at Pi Insurance. Jen, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns and when you were younger, to remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Thanks, Christina. I'm excited to be here. So Jen Straus, my pronouns are she, her, hers as well. I sit here in Denver, where Pi is headquartered. I'm the Vice President of People Operations here at Pi. And for those of you that don't know, Pi has the mission of making commercial insurance affordable and easy as pie. So excited to be here. What did I want to be when I grew up? I can tell you that I changed my mind quite a bit. Even through college. I changed my major 8 times in the first 2 years. But basically, when I look back at all of the things that I was interested in, it was really things that gave me the space to be creative while also providing space to learn and grow. So it ranged from anything from an author to a teacher. And now here I am.
And now here you are at Pi. I am excited to ask you about all the things that you're doing. I'm sure that you are being creative and working with a bunch of different other kind of departments as well to think about this dynamic thing of company culture. It's in the title of our interview series. As a people and HR leader, what are qualitative and quantitative ways you think about measuring, company culture and keeping a pulse on what's happening?
Yeah. When I think about culture, it's essentially the combined kind of output of consistent behavior. So it's what are people actually experiencing at work right now. For me, when I think about it specifically as a combination of A, whether we have values, and two, the degree to which those values are used as a bar against which we really measure our decision making and our actions and our behaviors as a company. So what are qualitative, I think the most obvious quantitative data is any type of engagement survey, because that tells us a lot about our behaviors, but also what people are experiencing. And then the qualitative, I think, comes through, it can be surveys and the comments that people are providing. It can also be some informal outlets like Glassdoor, comparably LinkedIn. It also comes by way of candidate experience. I think that we get a lot of the qualitative inputs. It's a matter of how we kind of combine them together to tell the story and make sure that there's consistency with what people are experiencing at Pi. So overall, I think what our qualitative and quantitative data show at Pi is that our cornerstone value, which is integrity, is really seen in the way that we behave. In our last survey, we got a lot of comments about transparency, which we really appreciated, and we tied back to that value of integrity.
Yeah, I think those values are really important, being rooted in kind of what do we stand for as leaders, what does the company stand for, and kind of your mission as well. And everybody's experiencing the company culture differently, whether it's kind of day one or, year one as well at the company too. And I want to kind of ask too, in terms of how these kind of values are showing up as well. I believe we talked about this a little bit too. How are you investing in those kind of family forming benefits at Pi Insurance, whether it's inclusive parental leave and other things of that nature too?
Yeah, this is a topic I love benefits. I mean, I lead benefits, but I just love benefits. I think that it's super important. It's one of those things where if you're not aware of them, it means that we're doing something right and or not feeling like you need to put energy into them as a team member. So my goal always when I think about benefits is how can we ensure that we're really meeting our team members where they are. And so with regard to parental leave and being inclusive, a big piece of this is making sure that what we're doing is not gendered in any way. So taking out kind of the traditional terms of maternity and paternity leave. We also don't differentiate between primary or non-primary caregivers, and really leaning into our value of integrity. It's knowing that not everybody is going to need this benefit, but what we do signals a lot to everybody, regardless of whether or not they ever take advantage of it. So, in terms of fertility benefits, this is something that we're actively seeking and considering about how and when and what can we do when will we really be in a position to offer something meaningful to our team members, which is really important. And we're seeing it more and more as kind of a standard benefit. So really, our goal is to provide benefits that allow people to feel safe and secure so that they don't need to worry about things like whether or not they'll have time off after they adopt a baby, things that aren't traditionally included in these types of leaves. We also want to make sure that they feel supported as they go through any types of fertility processes like IVF. So really just seeing these as really foundational benefits and give them the space to focus on the things that they're here to do.
I love that. I think inclusive language and the kind of words we use are really important as well. And it sends a signal. Also, you may not, need or, be aware of this benefit right now, but 6 months from now, a year from now as well, it really sends a signal to say, we have this, we value you as a parent, as a caregiver. Something else that really signals and is in terms of total rewards and compensation is your comp as well, the work that you're doing. What is your kind of philosophy around that compensation, and how are you iterating on comp across the board to really continue to be more equitable over years to come?
Yeah, when I think about compensation and changes and a lot that's happening right now, I think compensation is one of the areas that has been most rocked in terms of like the HR or people space. Traditionally, it's been this kind of black box where we're going to offer you something and you don't really ask questions about how that's determined or where promotions come into play or anything like that. So there's two things that I think of. One is what are the external factors that are impacting how we think about compensation? So that's something like Colorado's transparency law that went into effect in 2020. And now there's a number of other states and cities and counties and whatnot that are also enacting this type of legislature. So there's that piece. When Colorado enacted that law in 2020, we decided we're just going to do this across the board. Like this is good. The intent of this law is good and we agree with it. So let's not just parse out jobs that we're posting in Colorado, but let's actually do this across the board. So early on, we adopted that transparency in practice. The other thing that I think is really cornerstone to how we're looking at compensation is education. There's so much information on the internet about compensation that may or may not apply to how we think about compensation. So we've started this year doing compensation education sessions. What's our compensation philosophy? What's our compensation strategy? How are base salaries built? We want people to truly understand this really foundational and fundamental thing. And I think that that's one of the big things that, or maybe one of the most important things that we're doing in terms of being equitable. The more transparent you are, that transparency creates accountability. So that's just a really big thing. The last thing that I'll say on this in terms of equitability, there's the building of the process that says, okay, this is what we're teaching everybody on as far as how do we build our base salaries and whatnot. And also making sure that our processes don't have bias built into them. But then there's also the audit of we've built this thing in such a way as to mitigate against any biases, but we need to make sure that we're checking that what we've built has actually mitigated against any biases. There's my dog in the background. And that's really important because just because we think it will doesn't mean that it does. And so we need to do those audits quarterly, annually to make sure that we're not creating any compensation gaps that were not intended. And if so, then we need to adjust accordingly.
Yeah, it's that impact versus kind of intention conversation.
Yes.
Always being open to changing things, editing things slightly, being open to feedback as well. Consistently pushing the needle forward to make really great change that's affecting kind of your people too. When you think about the many different projects that you are working on, we mentioned a couple of them as well. How do you really think about measuring your effectiveness as a leader, as VP of People Operations, if there's any KPIs you look to or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, personally for me, there's a couple of things that I look at, whether it's like individually, how am I leading each individual, right? On my team and the people specifically that report into me. And part of this goes back to that experience piece and ensuring that the people that are reporting into me are having a good experience. That's my responsibility to them. my responsibility, and that looks different for all of them. I have 5 people that report to me. They are all very different. They all have very different needs, growth areas, everything that we work on and talk through, challenges in the business, et cetera. When I think about the success of the team, I'm very much like, where are we now and where are we going? So at the beginning of every year, just sitting down and just having that kind of thought session of what do we look like right now and what do I want us to look like at the end of the year? And then working with the leadership on the people team to say, how do we do that? How do we get there? And then we check in quarterly to make sure that we're making progress to that. My goal is always that we will, at the end of the year, at some point in time, look and go, we look completely different. But to never have felt specific pain points because we've been thoughtful and intentional about the timing of the changes, the degree of the changes, and all of that. So if we can impact the change while undermining any negative impacts, that's definitely something that I look for. In terms of specific KPIs, I mean, we have some of the traditional KPIs with turnover and things like that and engagement. The thing that I'm more interested in right now is how do we get to more interesting metrics for the people function. I'll use turnover as an example. It's really easy to be like, well, the standard is 10%, so we're going to have some measure around 10%. I don't I don't know if that stands. And reason being that if you look at the talent in your organization and you say, like, I'll look at my team, I'll use this as an example and say, I have 5 really strong performers. I don't want any of them to leave. Why would I want my turnover rate to be 10%? I don't want to lose anybody of my high performers. So I think it's taking a more holistic look at the organization and understanding like what is our talent density? What are we looking at right now? And therefore that we can have an outrageous goal of 5% if that makes sense for us. Why not?
Exactly. I think it's looking at those benchmarking. Why are we setting this goal? What can we do kind of differently to push it forward as well? And to your point too, being proactive about, thinking about transparency, communication as changes are happening too. I want to ask too, when you reflect back as your first time as a manager, you're thinking about new folks who are, transitioning from that role from individual contributor to manager. How do you help folks really feel empowered and resourced to really lead and motivate their teams?
Yeah, I think that there's specifically at Pi, I think that there's a couple of things that we do. We have a new manager or new leader resource guide, and it has everything in there. What I didn't want to do was put new leaders through an intensive training that's going to walk through all the details of everything that they may need to do at some point down the road because they're going to forget it. So what I wanted to do is make sure that we're providing the materials that they will need at specific points in time and also ensure that they have the partnership of their people partner, which is what we call our business partners, to make sure that they're there to support them through those processes, whether that's, hey, I haven't hired here before. How do I open a role? Like the really tactical things, or hey, somebody's really not performing well on my team. I don't know what to do. How do I have that conversation? So there's a lot of soft skills that our people partners are supporting and coaching our leaders with. And then there's just that tactical, like, here's how you manage here at Pi and lead here at Pi that we provide those resources for.
Absolutely. Thinking about information overload and also meeting people who are what would be most helpful right now and what's a helpful resource kind of down the road too. Keeping on that point of reflection, is there kind of a best manager you have had and why when you think about someone who really motivated and helped you?
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 people that come to mind. One was not in the like corporate space. I was previously was in academia, and one of my advisors, he was very to the point and very direct, which being direct is actually one of our operating principles here at Pi. But I appreciated it. It gave me a pretty tough skin to be able to just take the feedback and know that it wasn't personal. So that was, for me personally, a big learning experience. And then the other person that comes to mind, this person's not my direct leader, and I'm not saying this in any way to suck up, but John, our CEO at Pi, has actually had a really big impact on me. I've been around a lot of different CEOs, and I think everybody can agree, it's an incredibly difficult job. So, having had the opportunity to witness how different CEOs have really stepped into that role, a lot of them first time CEOs like John, I am really impressed by his ability to create focus and drive us as a company. And even though it's not like perfect all the time, the intention's there and the impact is growing. And I appreciate both his persistence with it and also the willingness to say, okay, we tried that thing that didn't work. So there's that vulnerability that I think we talk a lot about in the leadership space. But most importantly, I also have been in conversations where I see him and Dax, our other co-founder, specifically demonstrating our values. And when something's in conflict, so we like integrity, right? We want to do what's right when no one's looking, but we want to do what's right for our team members, for our customers, for our communities. Sometimes those three things do not go hand in hand. So having those really difficult conversations and witnessing that has been really impactful for me because I see that it's not really that easy all the time, which I think we know, but to witness it, but also just to see the commitment to it and the willingness to work through it.
Yeah, I think that modeling behavior is really important, and you want to do kind of the right thing when people are not looking, when folks are looking as well. And also speaks to
Mhm.
the point about how transparency really yields accountability too. How do you really think about holding leaders, both formal and informal, to be accountable, to have that equity driven mindset, to make sure they're consistently auditing their day to day processes as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in terms of accountability, this is something that we really drive. One of our core values is ownership at Pi. And like we talk about like being owners in Pi, but there's also the ownership of the team or of your own behaviors and the things that you're doing as an individual contributor or as a leader or whatever your role is here. So we really do emphasize that concept of ownership. And then one of the things that we do with our leadership team as well as we meet monthly to understand the state of the business and the health of the business. And knowing that you're going to have to report on that, there's some accountability that's driven in to just it's what you keep top of mind or forefront, right? That this is something that we're striving toward. Are we getting there? Is the work that we're doing right now getting us there? And if you don't check in on that, well, A, if you don't have the definition of what there is, you'll never get there. But B, if you don't have those specific intentional check-ins to say, are we getting there? You don't know. And you also don't know when to change course or if you're changing course too late. So I think that those are a couple of the things that we're doing.
I love that ownership is so important, ownership of your actions, of your deliverables, and also in terms of your behavior, your growth mindset as well. You mentioned kind of one of the great managers or kind of mentors you've had as well was really direct, and I imagine that kind of carries through with feedback too, and how you think about giving feedback as a leader. What is the key to really thinking about constructive and meaningful feedback, whether you're giving or receiving it?
I think it depends on the person. I'll use that same example. So when I had made the transition from academia to the corporate world, I was like, that worked for me. I'm going to try that. And it failed miserably. The first person that I gave feedback to in that way was devastated by my feedback. And it a huge learning opportunity for me and it was really difficult for me to repair that. And what I learned from that is that you need to understand everybody. Like again, the five people that report to me right now each receive feedback very differently. I am direct with each of them, but I'm direct with each of them in a different way and in a way that meets their needs. And so it takes a lot of time to understand your team. So it's not an answer, but I do think the key to meaningful feedback is recognizing that each person that you're giving feedback to is another relationship. And all relationships are bespoke and nuanced and understanding those little like idiosyncrasies and intricacies of that relationship is what allows you to deliver feedback well and also hear it and knowing like I know the intention here is good, so I'm willing to listen to this.
Yeah, and I think over communicating and really not assuming how someone likes to receive or give feedback. As we were saying, it's not a one size fits all approach, too. It's just like learning styles. Everybody has a different learning style, everyone has a different way of
Right?
giving feedback too. We've talked about a couple different kind of key themes in terms of company culture, compensation, really ensuring that folks feel seen, heard, and understood by their managers, executives, and leaders. Is there a kind of conversation or innovation happening in the people and HR space that you are most excited by and why?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of was getting at this in the compensation question that we were talking about a little bit ago, but I think that the social contract between employer and employee has shifted and it continues to evolve. But I think that we see this most right now in the areas of compensation and benefits. So the traditional contract no longer works to attract talent, and it definitely doesn't work to retain talent. So really the understanding of what is mutually beneficial has changed, and it's no longer okay to simply pay a wage and provide basic benefits. And those that this started to shift, probably maybe 10 to 20 years ago, but I feel like we're really feeling it now. And in the tech space, a lot of the times we're leading the charge in these areas, which is really exciting. But recognizing that people give so much time and energy to the work that they do, and the exchange for good, impactful, meaningful work is now good, impactful, and meaningful compensation and benefits. How do we think about what good, impactful, and meaningful compensation and benefits are? That conversation, that's exciting to me. That's the foundation of everything that we do. I think it's always important to remember that we live in a capitalist society. We are not here doing altruistic work. We are here to get paid. Therefore, we need to get the foundation right, and we need to make sure that people feel safe and secure, and that starts with comp and ben.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you as well. It relates to people's livelihood and their day to day and really thinking through and also being creative, pushing the envelope forward and thinking about that holistic benefits compensation strategy is so, so important. Jen, as we top off our conversation, I want to pass the mic back to you to see if there's anything I didn't specifically ask that you want to share with folks who are listening, underscore any key takeaways you hope people really bring with them.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think that, culture is really interesting, the term culture, because I think at some point in the last couple, maybe 10 to 20 years, it became kind of a buzzword. People really started to dismiss it as like this hokey thing or this like fluffy thing, and oh, you're going to go talk about culture. The culture's a shtick type thing. I think focusing the conversation on values and understanding that when we're talking about culture, what we're truly talking about is what we value and how that's reflected in people's experience. And that's it. Like, so you can't dismiss culture. Culture isn't hokey. It's not a shtick. It's literally what we experience for however many hours you are working every week, which can be a lot. So I think at Pi, that means that we are focused on integrity, and everything that we do is really rooted in that consideration of whether or not this is the best thing for our team members, our customers, our community, like I said. And when those things are in conflict, we continue to do the work and we come to a decision that we can really be proud of and commit to and defend. And that's our culture. Like, that's our culture.
That's the culture, the values, how they're reflected, how you're valuing people and being open to that feedback and continuing to build something really great because we spend so much of our times working, I would say, as a generalization too. Jen, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.